Hi everyone, I am Tejaswini of BA-AGILE-SCRUM.
Hi everyone, this is Sharda.
Hello team.
Hello everyone, my name is Tisha and I'm from batch 7.
Hello everybody, I'm Sneha Mukherjee.
Today in this video, I am going to summarize about the topics that we covered in the class. We have discussed about the Scrum 12 principles and then the Scrum process flow. So to describe the Scrum process flow, this is a diagram that we can follow. In this diagram, there are the stakeholders, the product owner, who manages the product backlog, then the sprint planning team that is done by the product owner, as well as the Scrum development team, to the sprint backlog, where the task or the Scrum development team task outs the work that needs to be carried out. Then is the Scrum team. This is the Scrum team. They also has the Scrum daily Scrum or the stand-up meetings every day, and then the finished product or the product increment, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. So to explain about each step, the stakeholders who come up with an idea or a concept to develop a product, they come up with an idea or a concept to develop a product. So the organization, in the organization, the product owner takes up the idea or the concept and divide it into the list of tasks in the priority basis. From here on, the product owner, along with the Scrum development team, consists of highly skilled, cross-function or self-organizing and cross-functional people who carry out the highly prioritized list of tasks from the product backlog, and they decide on the sprint. Usually sprint is the time box or the duration of the task carried out, which is around 2 to 4 weeks. Then the tasks are further breakdown in the sprint backlog, and in the sprint backlog, the development team lists out the work that needs to be carried out, and they are further broken down. From here, how do you know the progress of the work being carried out? The Scrum team, which consists of the product owner, the Scrum development team, as well as the Scrum Master, together the Scrum team, the Scrum team, they have a daily stand-up meeting or a daily Scrum for 15 minutes at the same time to discuss on the progress of the work. Then the finished product or the product increment is being delivered. At the end of the sprint review is being done by the stakeholders, asking them what they have desired for, what kind of result they have, a product they have desired for, and how they have built, what they are going to build further. Then also a sprint retrospective is being conducted, where the team comes together and discuss on the inspection and the adaptability, what improvements needs to be done further, and how they have been working together, and the outcome of these sprint retrospect are added to the sprint backlog. Okay, so this is one sprint. Likewise, once one sprint is done, the product owner again releases the product backlog, and then the work is being carried out. The priority of work is from high to last is the additional add-ons kind of thing in the product backlog. Okay, so this is all about the sprint process flow. Now, as I mentioned, the Scrum team consists of the Scrum Master, the product owner, as well as the Scrum development team. Now, the three roles together are the Scrum team. The Scrum, is described by 5 events, 3 artifacts, and 3 roles. Sprint itself, which is a container event, consists of sprint planning meeting, the daily Scrum, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. And the 3 artifacts are sprint backlog, product backlog, and product increment. The three roles of Scrum are the product owner, Scrum Master, and the Scrum development team. So this was in short about the Scrum process flow.
And today I want to talk a few words on the Scrum process flow, and this is the flow chart of the Scrum process flow, which we have already discussed. So Scrum is a simple framework which boosts the productivity and deliver products such that which delights the customers. And this process is done by breaking down the complex ones into smaller components, and later the team focuses on this smaller components and delivers them. So after each incremental step, the team re-evaluates on what has happened and what can be done in order to boost the productivity. So Scrum allows you and your team to inspect and evaluate the Scrum artifacts easily. So in this, before going into the Scrum process flow and how it works, let us discuss about the Scrum team. So in the Scrum team, we have the product owner, the development team, and the Scrum Master. All of them together, they make the Scrum team. So just briefly discuss about what they do. And the product owner is the person who takes all the feedbacks from the customers and the stakeholders, and he is totally responsible for preparing this product backlog. And the development team are those who work on the product owners on what is to be done on the final product. And next, the Scrum Master is the person who's responsible for taking away all the impediments and the obstacles all the way of the development team, and he makes the process easy for the development team to focus only on what the product is to be produced finally. And now let's go into the process. So in the process, the first step of the process is product backlog. So in the product backlog, so all the good products, they start up with a vision and a goal on how to reach there. And this is done totally by the product owner, and he who owns all the what's. So what this team should do and what the customers and the feedback has given, so it is taken by the product owner. So he takes all the feedbacks from the consumers and the stakeholders, and he makes a to-do priority list of the things, and that is known as the product backlog, and he tells what the team can do. And the next process is sprint planning meeting, where from here, this is the first one of the sprints. So the sprint is the heartbeat of Scrum, where it contains all the events in it. So it moves towards the goals and in order for the goal to achieve, and it consists of the sprint planning meeting and sprint backlog, the sprints, sprint review, and the sprint retrospective. So these are the four that are present in the sprints. So let's go to the sprint planning meeting. So all these people together, they sit together and discuss on what needs to be done in the planning, and from the product backlog, they take the highest priority to-do list and they make a shorter to-do list, and that is known as the sprint backlog. So after the sprint planning meeting, they make a shorter to-do list of the things which are necessary for that 1 week to 4 weeks of time where this development team can complete in that period of time. So they take those things and make a smaller to-do list, and that is known as the sprint backlog. And later comes the daily scrum. So this daily scrum is a meeting where all these people, all the team together, they discuss every day, every work day for 15 minutes, or it is also known as a stand-up meeting, where they discuss on 3 events, mainly on what was done yesterday, what is to be done today, and what are the impediments or the obstacles on the way to complete the work. So after the daily scrum meeting, the outcome of the sprint should be in such a way that it allows the product, it allows to produce a meaningful working product that can be given to the consumers or the stakeholders, and that is also known as a potentially shippable product, and that is the finished product. After this, the sprint should always be designed in such a way that it can can change its course if needed based on the feedback of the consumers or the stakeholders. And post sprint, we have two things, and that is sprint review and the sprint retrospective. So what is the sprint review? So in this event, the product owner makes sure that the right stakeholders and the consumers are present on that, so that they can use this potentially shippable product and give their feedback. That is done in the sprint review. And the next one is sprint retrospective. So here the team looks back on the process and the sprint of what happened and how it went well and what could be done better, so they can agree on doing something new and make the production in boost the productivity in the next sprint. So this is the Scrum process flow of how it goes.
So I'm just going to show you this small diagram, and then we can like go through it like piece by piece. So first there is like a product backlog. The product backlog is a whole master list or the ultimate to-do list of items or the task. These tasks are like basically requirements from the client. The backlog thus can be revised like from time to time, or it can be reprioritized as well based on any client requirements that, new client requirements that come in, or if they want some certain new features or some feature that becomes more urgent or more important. The product backlog basically has to be like consumed like, piece by piece. And it has to be look like a loaf of bread that cannot be consumed at one go, and it has to be eaten up like slice by slice. But you have like a limited time to consume each slice. More or less, the product owner is responsible for gathering client requirements, and that's why the responsibility of the product backlog largely lies on the product owner. Post that, we then move on to the next step, that is the sprint planning. Here the team basically comes together and decides which task or module they will take up for delivering in that particular sprint. And here they will keep in mind what the capability of the team is, what the size of the team is, and how long will it take for them to build the module. The Scrum Master generally runs this meeting, and it's for about an hour. After this, we then move on to the sprint backlog, which actually contains the goal itself, or rather the increment that the team is going to deliver, and how they will deliver the goal, or how they will deliver the increment. Post that, the Scrum team now begins to work on the deliverables as they have decided. This team is not more than 9 people, and it basically contains the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the developers themselves. They report their daily progress in this meeting called the daily Scrum, which ideally should not last for more than 15 minutes. The Scrum Master generally facilitates these meetings, making sure that the developers get onto that call, or get get into that meeting, where they just give they just give details about what they're going to do in the next 24 hours and what they have already achieved in the past few hours. Post that, the sprint review is next. Here basically the team comes together, and all the work that is achieved, and basically they discuss whatever is already achieved, or whatever is pending to be achieved rather. And finally, the increment, that is the goal, or the product of high value and working value, is delivered. After this product is delivered, the sprint does not end there. The next step would be the sprint retrospective, and this is like a meeting that takes place where the feedback is gathered from the client regarding the increment that was delivered, what is the scope of improving further in the future, and what are the mistakes that we have made and what we have learned from the sprint, and if any adjustments etc are needed to be made to the product backlog. And all this feedback is then incorporated and used to improve the upcoming sprints. Then this whole process is basically repeated almost immediately, and that's when the next sprint begins.
Today I'm going to explain you about Scrum Workflow, or the process of the Scrum work process. So in the Scrum process, there is 7 to 8 steps involved: stakeholder, product owner, product backlog, sprint planning, sprint backlog, daily Scrum, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. Here is the entire Scrum team who is involved in all this process. So stakeholder, or the customer, who comes up with the ideas to improve their product or the features of the product. Once they give all the requirement to they have to give all the requirement to the product owner. Once product owner have all the requirement and gather all the information from the stakeholder, product owner is the one who create the product backlog. Once the product owner create the backlog and gather all the required information, whole entire Scrum team sit together and they plan for the sprint, like they do sprint planning. So sprint planning is the product owner along with the Scrum development team establish the sprint goal, like what can be done or how to chosen work will be completed. Once they set the sprint planning, once they decide the sprint planning, then the next step it will be sprint backlog. In the sprint backlog is the set of the product backlog item that are selected from the sprint by the developer. And each sprint, and in sprint backlog, they make the smaller pieces, they break down the pieces, and each sprint has their own time period, and each sprint has a similar time period, 2 to 4 weeks. Once the sprint backlog is created, how they can check the progress for like how the progress is going, how the work has been done. For that, they have decided to do the daily Scrum. For the daily Scrum, they do daily 15-minute stand-up meeting, and entire Scrum team is involved in the daily Scrum. Whole team is involved in the daily Scrum to check the status of the progress of work they have done or what has to be done. Purpose of the daily Scrum is to inspect the progress of the sprint goal. So daily Scrum is the daily process. Once the sprint backlog is created, the next step is going to be an increment. So in the increment, potential release product or the finished product has been potential release product they can inspect. So some of the usable sprint backlog items completed by the development, and they can see the finished product in the increment. And after increment, it's going to be a sprint review. So in the sprint review, whole entire Scrum team is also involved along with the stakeholder. So sprint review is done by the stakeholder, so they can provide their feedback. So we can show them like what have been done and what is still remaining that we are going to do. And they can provide their feedback and determine the features that product owner can accept or adapt. Sprint review, they inspect the outcome of the sprint. And after sprint review is sprint retrospective. In sprint retrospective, teams comes together and decide what improvement needs to be done on the product, or the team identify the improvement to make for the next sprint. So the next sprint will be more effective and more successful. So here are the Here are all the steps and process involved in the Scrum workflow.
Here to summarize what we have learned from our last training session. So we have learned Agile Manifesto principles, the difference between Agile and Scrum, and whereas Agile philosophy, waterfall project, its constraint, like time, cost, and scope. But here you can see on my screen that I'm here to describe the Scrum process flow. The Scrum process flow is the the process when the product owner creates the product backlog, and that is the list of all the features and function and requirements that might be needed in the final product of the project. The Scrum team get together. The Scrum team get together and in a sprint planning meeting and decide what items in the product backlog and they can work or and complete during the next time box. This list of product backlog item is frozen in a sprint backlog. The development team immediately get to work completing the items in the sprint backlog in a set time frame called sprint. Every day during the sprint, the development team and the Scrum Master meet in short 15-minute stand-up meeting called the Daily Scrum to discuss their individual progress and plan for the whole work to be completed in the next 24 hours towards the end of the sprint development. To demonstrate the output of the work they have done up to and now all the latest product increment and the potential business value they refine the product backlog in the preparation. The next iteration of sprint, the process begins again. Usually the duration of a sprint is minimum to 1 to a maximum to 4 week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.